Today I'm going to talk about what filmmakers use to edit with and also what you should be using. In today's world, video editing is kind of crucial to everything. Marketing, making films, making YouTube videos, just basic production, just putting two pieces of video together. There's all kinds of needs for video editing. But when we think of video editing, we always think of the movies. We think of filmmakers. And so I want to talk a little bit about what do those filmmakers and people in Hollywood actually use to edit with. Now, there are a list of different video editing softwares that you can use to edit video on, but what are some of the top options? What are the filmmakers using, and what are also good for just consumers like myself and you? I'm going to go through that today, and then I'm going to give a recommendation of what it is I think you should be using based on my experience. So what is it that filmmakers are using to edit with? Well, let's start with the very first one. It's the very first NLE, which stands for non-linear editing, that was invented. It's a software called Avid. Now, Avid has been around for a very long time. The very first version of Avid was called Avid 1, and it was created in 1989. Now, that's a good ways away when you think about today, which is 2021. That's about 30 years ago. But this was the first one that they ever made, and actually it was adopted very quickly into Hollywood. It was adopted very quickly into career filmmakers and videographer freelancers. And it was a very powerful tool for its time. Unfortunately, as technology has progressed, we can look back and see that technology was not good hardly at all, especially in the video world when it comes to recording, editing, and distributing video content. But Avid was the first one, and Avid is still around today. They're kind of the OGs in the industry. However, I'm not going to exactly say that this is the perfect one that you should be working with, but it has been for a very long time, and in some cases, even today, is still the Hollywood standard. Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro has had so many controversies over the years. I'm sure you weren't aware of them necessarily, but back in 1998, Final Cut was released, and it was a very good software for its time once again. There were Hollywood films like the movie 300 that used Final Cut to cut the film together. But unfortunately, back in 2011, there was a big controversy that kind of shattered, in some ways, the future of Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro came out with a version of their software called Final Cut Pro 10, or some people call it Final Cut Pro X. And basically what it did is it used a method called a magnetic timeline. Honestly, up to this point, nobody had used anything like it. And it just shook the industry in such a way that people retreated from using Final Cut. Even people that had been using it for years, they were like, I can't use this new version of Final Cut Pro. I can't. It's too complicated. It doesn't make sense in my brain. And so the whole concept of a magnetic timeline kind of fell apart. It actually kind of not destroyed, but really messed up Final Cut's momentum to be one of the industry standard editors. But at the same time, it is a powerful software. They spent a lot of time crafting this concept of a magnetic timeline, and so it's not completely useless. It really isn't. It's actually a very powerful program, but it's really hard for people that have a background in editing to get used to the new style of editing that Final Cut Pro brought to the industry. Let me just cut in really quick. If you're enjoying this video and you're finding value out of this content, I just want to encourage you, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It would mean a whole lot that you leave a like and comment. Thank you for subscribing. Let's get back to the video. Let's move on to another one that is extremely popular. You've probably heard of it before. It is Adobe Premiere Pro, and it is currently being powered by a overlord called Creative Cloud. Now, Creative Cloud is essentially the online cloud storage space that allows Adobe to make updates and fixes and all kinds of new features to Premiere as they create them. And so Premiere is a very, very powerful editor. A couple downsides is that it is a little slow on export. It does tend to have a lot of bugs. The good thing about Premiere Pro is that there's so many people that use it that you can pretty much Google or YouTube any issue you're having with Premiere Pro, and within a 5 to 20 minute search session, you can pretty much solve your Adobe Premiere issues yourself. Once again, there are Hollywood films that have been edited on Premiere. And to be honest, even for freelancers, it's becoming a extremely consumable yet very professional editing software. And not to mention a lot of other companies like broadcast companies, independent churches, commercial freelance companies. There are all sorts of video production companies, including Hollywood, that are using Premiere Pro. And that's really exciting for Adobe. Adobe Premiere has been around since 2003, and outside of just Adobe Premiere, you have options to pay for the entire Creative Suite package. That includes, Audacity, it includes After Effects, it includes Photoshop, Illustrator, Lightroom. There are so many popular Adobe softwares that I'm sure you've heard of, and Premiere Pro is just one. If you were to go ahead and get this, it's about the same cost as Avid, except you're paying monthly. If you were to get the whole Adobe Creative Cloud suite, well, it's going to be more expensive. It might be closer to $600 a year. Whereas if we go back to Final Cut is actually more expensive, Final Cut Pro X, to get today than even using Avid or Adobe Premiere Pro. Let's go to the next one. The next one is DaVinci Resolve. Now, DaVinci Resolve has been around since 2004. It's a pretty powerful and innovative software. I wouldn't say first and foremost it's known for video editing, although you are able to edit with it. DaVinci Resolve got its reputation primarily for its color grading software. It's a very, very powerful software, and in fact, it's free. DaVinci Resolve is free on Blackmagic Design's website. You can go get it. But I will say I haven't used it too much as far as editing, but I've used some of the color correction, and I will say it holds up to its reputation. It has a lot of powerful tools that are at your disposal to make your footage look amazing with the color that you filmed. So although it is an editing software, most of the time people in Hollywood are using it for its color grading, color correcting abilities. The last one is Vegas Pro. Now, I will say this, Vegas Pro is not as well known or even as much used. Vegas Pro has been around since 1999. It's been used by a lot of kind of independent creators. I'm sure there's been some Hollywood films that's used it because it has a reputation for being a somewhat powerful editing software, but it hasn't really stood the test of time. You haven't seen a lot about Vegas Pro over the years. They haven't been super innovative in the industry, and so although Vegas Pro is one of, let's say, the top 5 editors, it's not necessarily standing out against the others. It's not necessarily the tool that you would want in your tool bag if you're trying to be serious about the filmmaking or video production craft. So like I said, I'm going to answer the question of what I believe you should be using to edit your videos. If you already use an editor and you're comfortable with it and you've been doing this for a long time, I have to say, just disregard what I'm saying. I mean, I'm not going to say that I know more than another videographer or another filmmaker out there or another video editor out there. It really depends on what the person knows and what you're comfortable with. But I will say I've been doing video production and I've edited with both Avid, Adobe Premiere, DaVinci, and Vegas Pro, and I've only dabbled in Final Cut. But I will say I know these softwares. I've worked with all of them, and I have to say that out of all of them, there are two that I think are important to get familiar with and maybe even become a professional at going into the future. The first one, for nonlinear editing, the most key factor that I'm seeing is Adobe Premiere Pro. The reason why is it has stood the test of time. It started off just like all the others. Adobe was trying to figure out how are we going to make a awesome video editing software, and they've been the most innovative over the years. Although softwares like Avid have been around the longest, they have not been as innovative and as business savvy as Adobe has with Premiere Pro. And not just with Premiere Pro, but with Photoshop, Lightroom. The whole Creative Cloud concept makes video editing a dream. And although Premiere has its downsides with some bugs and a little bit slower than others, and even features like sharing through a cloud, Adobe Teams, it was super helpful during the pandemic when people were working and editing remotely, but it's only going to get better. And the features that are missing that you might find in another editor are only going to be added shortly. The other software that I have my eye on and that I think actually is probably going to keep growing in popularity and maybe move into the future would be DaVinci Resolve. Just like its original reputation, it may never outdo Adobe Premiere in the abilities to edit well, but it very well could outdo Adobe in color grading into the future. We really just have to wait and see. Adobe Premiere is constantly innovating. They have a lot of money and resources to work with, so perhaps Adobe could come up with a wonderful color grading software to add to their Premiere package. We just haven't seen anything necessarily that rivals DaVinci Resolve on that front. So if I were to recommend any of these, personally, I'm going to recommend Adobe Premiere Pro. And if you want to kind of get familiar with maybe what Hollywood will use going forward to color grade, then DaVinci Resolve is a good option as well. But I think the combination of these two will make you a very powerful editor. I think that sets you up for not just personal knowledge to be on YouTube or to do freelance work for businesses, but even to work for companies that would hire you as an editor who are already using Adobe Premiere Pro, who are already in Hollywood using DaVinci to color grade their film. So if you get comfortable with these two, this is my best guess and what my gut says that the future of the editing industry is going to look like. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you enjoyed this video, I ask you once again that you would subscribe to this channel. I would really appreciate that. Leave a comment. Tell me what editing software you want to learn and if this information was helpful and maybe even any further questions about Adobe Premiere Pro. I would love to talk with you. Thanks for subscribing, liking, and commenting on this video. We'll see you next time.